So now that we've got our Maproom model showing our terrain, let's zoom into the Cape Town CBD a little. Now you will notice that the resolution is very ordinary, and this is because we're doing such a large area. So the only way within Maproom for us to actually increase that resolution is to reduce the size of the area that we cover, because we're limited to that pixel size. As we said in the terrain there, that pixel size changes that. But for now, this is an adequate resolution for what we're going to do. Now what I want to show you is how to add in building and other data from OpenStreetMap. Now we could specifically just show a small section of OpenStreetMap data, or we can choose to do the whole area. Since we have it, let's just go with the whole area of 60 by 100 kilometers. Now what we can choose is what information we want. So in this example, let us just show full OSM. So that's all the data you can get out of OpenStreetMaps. You could go even further and say include point data, such as individual trees and bus stops. That's going to create a lot of data, but let's not do that. Now, you can merge shapes into groups when imported, and I'll show you the advantage of that in our first example. And so what we'll need to do, and this will take quite some time to generate, is to download and draw OSM data. So if we click on that big yellow button, that will actually generate all of that information. But one other step we should note is we can align the shapes to ground plane or to terrain. So if we choose to align them to the terrain, that is our ideal scenario, because as you see, this is not a totally flat site, and we will again have to wait quite a lot. Bit of time for all this information to be downloaded and generated in our model through Maproom. If you notice within the Maproom window in the bottom left, it's counting the number of relations drawn. So that's all the various components that are being brought in from OpenStreetMap. So you can see that Maproom is still generating all of the components that it now needs to generate. This example is quite long, purely because of the huge area we're covering and the significant amount of Maproom data. But I wanted to show you this so you can see how this was generated for our group project. So in the drawing of these components, looks like we're about halfway, and we've generated those model components, though there are still more to be generated. But as you can see on our map now, we have a whole bunch of line work. We'll wait for the next part, solitaire nodes drawn, to complete so that we can get on to the next stage. So as you can see here, a lot of the data has been generated, which comes from OpenStreetMaps. But interestingly, even though we selected align shapes of terrain, that has not happened, because you can see that in the middle part where Cape Town starts to rise in elevation, we've lost all our components, and that is because they're actually flat on the ground plane and they haven't been moved up to the surface. So in order to generate 3D buildings, what we need to do is choose from the style sheet, and we'll pick Sys OSM style sheet, which is the default style sheet for buildings, roads and areas. And you can see multiply height. We stick with 1 because we just want everything shown as 1 to 1. And we can leave the fill spacing as it is by default. And we click apply style sheet. This will actually generate all of the buildings in 3 dimensions. Again, this will take some time. You'll note that even though we asked for all the objects to be aligned to the surface, that hasn't happened. Many of the buildings are actually underneath the terrain, as you can see here. So that is one challenge that we have with the Maproom plugin. One of the other challenges is that Maproom groups similar objects onto the same layer. And as a group, if we try to move them, they all move. So it's not so easy to move them individually to the surface to get them positioned correctly. Nevertheless, Maproom is a great way for us to create terrain data and put lots of accurate position buildings into a scene.